Hello there, you welcome back to my channel. In this part of this video, we are going to add a bit more spicing to our scene. We will complete our scene by adding the floor plane, and we will go a bit more into physics simulation to add a napkin or our cloth on the tray, and we will finally add our lighting and textures to finalize our delicious scene. This is going to be a quite comprehensive tutorial, so bear with me, and I bet you are going to learn a whole lot in this tutorial. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and smash that like button to feed the algorithm. So let's jump into it. Okay, so in this part we are going to complete our scene. Okay, so we already have our breakfast, our mug and our bread on our tray, the breadcrumbs. Okay, so the next thing we are going to do is to add the floor. So let's add Shift A to add a plane, and then press S to scale, and then 5, scale it 5 times, and then we have our base, and then we are going to add a cloth. We are going to add a cloth on our tray. So Shift A and add a plane, and then S to scale, and then 2 to scale it 2 times, and then let's go to the side view and then move our plane up a bit, and then we can now rotate it on the x-axis. Okay, and then go to the top view, move it a bit on the y-axis, and then go to the top view, and then let's make sure it's at the edge. We want the napkin to be at the edge, and we can rotate it a bit. Okay, so we are going to add a cloth simulation. So let's go to the edit mode, right click, and then subdivide, and then go to the drop down and then add 20, type in 20 for the subdivisions. Okay, and then we can go back to the object mode. So we are going to add another modifier. Let's add the subdivision modifier. So go to modifiers and add the subdivision to give it more density. Okay, so now I'm going to add the cloth, but we first add a collision to our tray. So select your tray, and then let's go to the physics tab, and then let's add the collision to our cloth, to our tray, sorry. And then let's disable the edges, the single-sided, and then increase the friction to 30. Okay, and then let's do the same settings for the ground or the floor. Add the collision and then disable, and then let's add the collision to it, and then disable the single-sided, and then increase the friction to 30. Okay, so that's it for our ground plane and our tray. And then now let's select our cloth and then add the cloth simulation. So for the cloth simulation, we are going to change certain settings. So the vertex max, we are going to change the vertex max to 1 kilogram, and then we are going to change the stiffness, the tension. We are going to change the tension also to 1. Okay, input 1, and then for the bending, we are going to change it to 1 also. Okay, so that's all for this setting, and then you scroll down to the collisions tab, and then click to bring down the drop down, and then check the self collision. And then in this self collision, we are going to change the friction also to 30. Change the friction to 30. Okay, so that's basically our settings that we need to do for the clothing. So now let's see how it works. Okay, so now you can play. Okay, press the space bar to play, and you can see the collision. Okay, the simulation take place. Okay, so this is the effect that we have from our cloth settings. So right click and then shade smooth. Okay, so you can see that the simulation is having an effect on our cloth. So the collision on the floor and the tray is affecting the cloth. So let's rotate it a bit from the top view so that we get a more dense or a more realistic effects on our cloth. So rotate it a bit and then press the spacebar key again and then play to see the effect you get. Okay, so you are doing okay, so you can rotate it a bit on the Z axis. Okay, so that's all we really need to do, adjustment of the position of our cloth to get the effects that we want. So play it again and then okay, no, it looks too flat, it doesn't have any wrinkles, so I don't think this is a right rotation. So sometimes you need to adjust it, you need to do some adjustment to get it how you want. Okay, let's play it once more. Okay, seems like this is okay. So let's add another subdivision modifier to bring in more details. Let's add the subdivision modifier to bring in more details. So you can see that there is more details here, and let's add the solidify modifier to give it the thickness of a cloth. Okay, so you can see our cloth coming together, and let's reduce the thickness just a bit. Okay, let's reduce, let's play the thickness a bit. Okay, no, it's too much, let's reduce it. Okay, so now how about cloth? Okay, so it seems like it's okay, so let's play the animation once more. Let's rotate it a bit for more detail. Okay, so let's play it once more and see the effects you are getting. Okay, so it seems like the details is coming in more, so I want to stick with this position. Okay, so this is okay for our collision. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to go into the cloth settings and then go to the cage and then click on the drop down, and then we are going to bake. So click on the bake to bake your cloth simulation, final cloth simulation. Okay, you have to wait a bit. Okay, so it's done, and then what we are going to do next is we've now baked our cloth simulation, so it's now baked into keyframes. So what we are going to do next is to apply the cloth simulation. So we are going to apply the cloth simulation, but before you do that, you have to add the subdivision, or else if you apply it, you see that we are losing the details. You lose the details you have. So before we apply, let's apply the subdivision before we apply the cloth. But before we apply the subdivision, the cloth simulation, let's scroll, or let's scrub on our timeline and see where we have more details in our cloth. Okay, so you can scrub front and back and then check where you have more detailed. Okay, so let's go back a bit. So it seems like you have more details here on the landing. So as you can see, okay, so as it lands on the table, we have more details here. Okay, so we are going to leave it here, and then we then apply our cloth simulation, and then we have it set. So this is our final simulation or effects on our cloth, and it's okay for us. Okay, so that's it for our cloth simulation. Yeah, so the next thing we are going to do is to set the camera view. So let's select our camera and then press the number 0 and then go into our camera view. So after you go into our camera view, you can press the N to bring up the properties menu and then go to view. So if you uncheck the camera to view lock, then it's going to, when you zoom in, it's not going to set your camera. But if you keep it checked, you can set your camera angle from the camera view. So you can check the camera to view and then set your camera angle. You can zoom in, you can pan around, and then you can use it to set our camera view. Okay, so let's rotate this a bit. So it's just a bit of adjustment. Just look for a vantage view, a nice view. that will capture the detail of our scene. And after that, you can uncheck the camera to view. Okay, so let's scale out our floor to cover our camera. Okay, so we are going to fill in the scene. So that, okay, so now we are going to add our textures and our lighting to our scene. We first add the lights to our scene. So before the materials, our tray, our jug and our bread, and the cloth. And then we are going to add the floor material. So let's go to the shading tab. Let's switch to the shading tab. Okay, and let's switch to the solid mode. Okay, so we are going to split our view into two. Change the view into two, and then we are going to view our render in the right side. So we go to the camera view, number 0 to go to the camera view, and we can see, let's give more space over here, and then let's bring our screencast key so that we can see what we are doing. Okay, so let's make sure it's showing on the left side. Okay, so we have our screencast key so that I can see what I'm pressing here. Okay, so on this right side, let's go scroll and then view it in the rendered mode, and then let's uncheck the outlines, okay, and the gizmos, so you can see only our renders. And let's go to the render tab and then change from EV to cycles, and then press Ctrl B and then drag your mouse across the camera to view only from the camera what you are seeing in the camera. Okay, so what we are going to do next is our lighting. So let's select this light and then press X to delete. We are going to add our own light. Okay, so let's add Shift A, and then I'm going to add area light. Let's press Shift A and then add, not Shift S, Shift A, and then add the area light. Go to light and then add area. Then let's drag it. Go to the side view and then grab. Press G to grab and then move it forward. Okay. Then let's rotate it. Let's rotate it from the side view. Okay, let's rotate it this way. So as you can see here, the lighting is coming out of our scene. So let's duplicate this light, Shift D, then move it to the left side, and then let's rotate it to face our scene. Okay, let's adjust it a bit and then rotate it to face our scene. You can see the effect over here. Okay, it's hitting our mark. This is the fill light, this is the main light. Let's duplicate it once more and then rotate it again, send it to the right side and then rotate, and then this is going to be our room light. So we are using the 3-point light in here. We use 3 lights for our scene. Let's adjust the position a bit. Okay, so it's okay now. So we are going to change the settings for our light. So to change the settings of our light, let's select the left one and then go to the light properties, and then let's change the strength from 10 to 200. So inputs 200 watts, and then let's change the color. So for the color, right click the color, right click and then change the hue. Change the hue to 0.635, and then we are going to change the saturation to 0.8. 0.684, and then we leave the value at 1. So we are going to get this blue saturated light. So this is our floor light. Okay, and then for the room lights, let's change that one to the strength to 500, and then let's change our color. Let's change the hue to 0.49, and then the saturation to 0.575. Okay, and let's leave the value at 1. So it's going to give us this orange looking light, this warm light. And then let's change the front to 200 watts, and then we are going to change our hue, our color. Let's change the hue to 0.083. okay, and let's change the saturation also to 0.510, and also leave the value at 1. Okay, so this is the basic lighting for our scene. So as you can see, our scene has been lit. So the next thing we are going to do is just a bit of adjustment. Adjust the light so that it can light up the scene accurately, and let's bring it a bit closer. Okay, so that I can hit our 3D objects well. Okay, let's rotate it a bit from the top view, then move this one also closer. Okay, and let's rotate it a bit, so you can see that it's lighting up our scene well. So what we are going to do next is to add the texture for our tray. So I want to add a very simple material to our tray. Let's go to the materials tab and then click on new, then let's rename it to tray. So for the tray material, I want to add a simple hue. For the base color, let's change the hue to 0.128, and then we are going to change the saturation to 0.480. okay, and then we also change the value to 0.562. okay, so that's it for the tray material, and then we are going to change the roughness to 0.3. okay, so that's it for our tray. Now let's add the material for our mark. Add a new material, and then let's rename it, and then let's come to the node editor and then click on our base color. For the hue, let's change it to 0.183, and then let's change the saturation to 0.128, and then the value to 0.685 for our value. Okay, and let's also change the roughness to 0.3. okay, so that's it for our mark. So the next thing we'll be texturing is our cloth. So for our cloth, the material is a bit complicated, so we are going to create a flannel material for our cloth. Okay, so let's add a new material for the cloth, and then let's rename to cloth, and then we are going to add a couple of nodes in our node editor. So let's give out a bit space, and then press Shift A. The first node we are going to add is the wave node. The wave node is what we are going to be using for the flannel texture. Okay, so let's view it. Numpad // to view only the napkin, Then let's change this side to the solid view, and then let's view here in the rendered view so that we can see what we are doing. And let's change the scene lighting. Let's uncheck the scene world so that we can see it clearly. So we don't want this background, so let's go to the render tab and then go to film and then check the transparent to hide the background. Okay, so now with this wave texture we're going to change a bit of the parameters on it, but before we do that, let's go to the edit and then go to preferences, then go to the add-ons. So we are going to add a very important add-on, which is the node wrangler. It's very important, make sure it's checked and then save your preferences. So it's very important in our node, it's really going to help us. So with the node wrangler enabled, you can press Ctrl T and then you have your mapping node. Very simple as that, very useful. So let's change the size of our scale. Okay, no, we are not going to change the size. Before we change the size, let's view it. Hold down the Ctrl Shift and then click on it to view your node. And without the node wrangler you can't do this operation, so make sure it's enabled. So we are going to leave the scale of our wave as 5. Okay, let's change it to 0.5. no, we are going to leave it as 5. And then what we are going to do is we rather change the scale of our mapping node to 0.5 to 0.5. okay, so this is the scale that we are looking for. Okay, so let's give it a bit more space because we are going to add another node in between our wave texture and our principle. Before that, let's duplicate our wave texture and then bring down our mapping node. Select it and bring it down a bit, grab and then bring it down a bit, and then we are going to connect this node to the vector and then make sure that it's connected to the UV. The UV, make sure it's using the UV coordinates, not the generated. So let's connect the UV coordinates to it and let's view this node. So hold down the Ctrl Shift and then click to view, so you can see it's the same, but I want to change something in the second one. For the second wave texture, you have to change the rotation. So in order to do that, let's select our mapping node in the coordinates and then move it up, and then rather duplicate our mapping node, Shift D to duplicate it and then bring it down, and then we are going to connect it to the vector and then the UV. Let's connect this UV coordinates to that one. So what we are going to do is we are going to change the rotation of this mapping node. So not the Y, we are going to change the Z. So the Z rotation, we just change it to 90. Click and then input 90 degrees to change the rotation. So as you can see, hold down the Ctrl Shift and then view. So you can see that our two wave textures have different rotations. Okay, so we want to join these two rotations to get our flannel texture. So we add our color ramp node, Shift A to add the color ramp. So we want to sharpen our texture. Let's add the color ramp and then let's sharpen it by bringing our white and black parameters closer to each other. Okay, a bit more closer, so that it sharpens our texture for us. So we are going to use this grayscale information to join our two textures. So let's duplicate the color ramp and then input our second wave texture to it, and then let's space it out a bit. So we have to find a way to join these two nodes. So we are going to use the Shift A and then go to color, mix color. Okay, no, it's not the mix color. Let's delete the mix color it's not, yeah, okay, I'm not going to use the mix color. So we have the wrong node here. Let's delete, press X to delete the mix color, and then we are rather going to add a matte node. So shift A, converter, and then go to matte and then add the matte node, and then let's input the first one into the value 1 and then the second one into the value 1. So let's view our matte node, then change it to multiply. So as we can see, we are now joining the two textures, our two wave nodes together. Okay, so what we are going to do next is to change the color. So for the color, let's bring in the mix color node and then connect it to the factor. Okay, so we are going to connect our matte node to the factor, and we are going to change the A and B values of our map node. So for the A value, let's change the hue. Let's change the hue to 0.527, and then the saturation to 0.788, and then the value, also change the value to 0.249. Okay, so that's the A value. So we get a dark blue or a sea blue color, and then for the B, let's change it to 0.527, the hue to 0.527, and then the saturation to 0.581. okay, and then the value to 0.337. okay, so we are going to get a more darker version, a more faded out version of our first color. So now let's connect it. Let's view our principled and then connect it to our principled shader. Okay, so you can see that we created a flannel texture for our cloth. So we are going to change a bit, just a bit of the parameter for our principle. So let's go to the specular and then let's drag it all the way to 0. So we don't need a specularity on our cloth. So 0 specularity, more realistic. And let's go to the sheen, and then we are going to change the sheen weight to 0.5, and then we are going to change the roughness, the sheen roughness to 0.2. so it's going to give us more realistic cloth effect. Okay, so that's it for our cloth. Nothing really complicated. Okay, so for the next one, we are going to add, so as you can see here, we have added our flannel texture to our cloth. As simple. So let's add the texture for our bread. Okay, so for our bread is going to be a bit complicated. We are going to use a bit more notes for the bread, so bear with me. Okay, so let's view it, numpad / to isolate, and then let's add a texture and then rename it. Okay, bread crisp. So we are going to rename this bread crisp. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit and then let's add a couple of notes. Okay, so for the bread, the first node we are going to add, let's space out. For the bread, the first node we are going to add is the Voronoi texture. So shift A and then go to texture, look for texture, and then add the noise texture. Let's add the noise texture first. Okay, so after we add the noise texture, we add the Voronoi texture. Let's add the Voronoi texture. Okay, so after we add the Voronoi texture, I'm going to add another node. Let's view our Voronoi and then hold down the control and then press T, Control T to bring in the mapping node, and we are going to connect it from generated to object. Let's change it to object, Okay, and then let's change the scale of our Voronoi texture to 73.73. so this is the texture of our bread, the basic texture for our bread. So this is the overall texture that we are going to be using mostly to texture our bread. Okay, so after we've added it, we are going to add another node. Let's add the color ramp node. Let's input it in the middle. Okay, so we are going to add another node between the color ramp and the Voronoi texture. Before that, let's change the position of these two handles. So we are going to change the first one to 0.1 to, I'm going to change it to 0. And let's change the second one also to 0.673. okay, the first one to 0.291 and then the second one to 0.673. and then let's select the rest and then move it back a bit. Now we are going to add another node. Go to converter and then add the map range between them and then change the from minimum to 0.2. okay, we are going to change the from minimum to 0.2. okay, so it's going to define our texture more. We are going to add another color ramp node. So you can duplicate this color ramp. Let's select the color ramp and then shift D. okay, let's give out more space. Try shift D to duplicate the color ramp. Let's move our noise texture to this side. Okay, let's view our noise texture and then we are going to duplicate this color ramp. Before we duplicate our color ramp, let's connect the mapping node to our vector, the vector of our noise texture. Okay, and then let's select the noise texture and then change the scale of our noise texture to 0.8. okay, so this is the scale that we are going to have for our noise texture. So select the color ramp and then let's duplicate the color ramp and then connect it in between the noise texture. So we are also going to change the position of our, select the first handle and then change the position to 0.009 and then select the second handle, select the white handle which is the second one and then change the position to 0.473. okay, so that's the position for the A and B. The first, our grayscale colors. Okay, okay, let's change the position to 0.291 rather, and then change the second, for the second position let's change it to 0.673. okay, so this is what we have for the noise texture. Okay, so you can play with it to get more. So this texture, we are going to join it with our Voronoi texture to get our bread texture. We are going to join it later with our Voronoi texture in order to get the brown effects, the golden brown effect. So the Voronoi is the base for our bread, and then this noise texture is going to determine the brownness of our bread. So let's add another node, then matte node, and let's join these two textures. Let's view our matte node and then let's connect the first color ramp to the first value and then the second color ramp to the second value. Okay, and let's change from art, let's change it. Okay, so it seems like we have the wrong node. we have the wrong node. So what we are going to do is, let's delete this node, X to delete, and then let's rather add the color, the mix color node. Always confuses. Then let's join it to the A and the B. Then let's change the color. Let's change the color to darken, from multiply to darken. Okay, so in order to see the effect for our textures, we have to change the colors in our color ramp. We have to change the colors in our color ramp in order to get the color of our bread. So for the first one, we are going to change the hue to 0.086. For the first handle, we change the color to 0.086, and then the saturation to 0.807, and then we are going to change the value to 0.111 for the first handle. So we are going to get this brown color. And then for the second one, we are going to change the hue to 0.059, and then for the saturation, we are going to change it to 0.783, and then for the value, we are going to change it to 0.847. Okay, so after that, I'm going to get this peach color, this cream peach color. So that's the base of our bread. Now let's change the colors for our second color ramp. So for the first handle, let's change the hue to 0.011, and then we are going to change the saturation to 0.927, and then the value to 0.111, and then for the second handle, we are going to change the hue to 0.065, and then the saturation, we change it to 0.852, and then we are going to change the value to 0.847. Okay, so that's it for the second one. So as you can see here, for the first one is giving us the base effect, and then the second one is giving us this brownish effect. So this is the brown or the bend of our bread. This is to give you that effect, and this is the base of our effect. So you can see that we are joining the two effects together, the two textures together, to get the brownish color of our bread, to give it more realism. So let's connect it to our base color of the principled BSDF, and this is the effect you are getting. Okay, so we have a couple more settings to do. So we now have the base of our crisp. So we are going to, it's a half loaf, so the inside, we are going to do the inner part of our bread since it's cut into half. So what we are going to do is to add another color ramp at the gradient texture. So we are going to use the gradient texture to separate the inside from the outside. So as you can see, the gradient texture is giving us a grayscale transition from the inner part of the bread to the crisp. Okay, so let's add another converter, another color ramp node. Let's add another color ramp node for the gradient, and then let's move the black color a bit backwards so that we can determine where our texture will show for the inner part of the bread. Okay, so let's change the position. You can change the parameters to 0.159. Okay, and then for the second one we can change it to 0.205. so this is the effects that we are getting, and we can adjust it later if it's not okay for us. So let's space it out a bit. We are going to add another node here. So we are going to add the mix color node. We are going to use the gradient texture to determine where we have our crisp and where we have our inner part of the bread. So we have to create another texture so that we connect it to the B, to the second part of our mix color node. So what we are going to do is we are going to add another color ramp node. We are going to use this noise texture to create the inner part of our bread. So we duplicate our color ramp node, and then connect our Voronoi texture into that color ramp node. So as you can see, it's the same as this. So the only thing we are going to change is the color of the inner part. So for the first handle, let's select the first handle, and then let's change the hue to 0.086. let's change the hue okay, so let's change the hue for the second one to 0.106, and then the saturation to 0.631, and then the value, let's change the value to 0.941. okay, so we can leave the first one since we don't really need to change it. The only thing we need to change is the position. So we are going to change the position to 0.009, and then for the second one we are going to change it to 0.473. okay, so this is the color that we have for our inner part of the bread. So what we are going to do is we are going to connect this color ramp to the second or the B part of the mix color node. We are going to connect to the B part of the mix color node, and then we are going to select this gradient texture and then connect it to the factor. Okay, so as you are having the effect here, you can see that it's flipped. We rather have the crisp inside and then the inside out, so we just switch the connection. We put the first one into the B and then the second color ramp into the A. So you can see that we are now having the inner part of our texture at the right place, and you can adjust the color ramp for our gradient texture to get it at the right spot. Okay, so we now have our inner parts of the bread where it's supposed to be. So as you can see, we have the basic texture for our bread crisps, the outer part and then the inner part. So we are now down for the basic texture of our bread. So what we are going to do next is to add more detail to our bread for it to look more realistic. So let's add a color ramp. Shift A, go to converter and add a color ramp node. So we're going to add roughness, how smooth our bread is going to be, and let's connect our Voronoi texture to the color ramp node, and let's view our color ramp. And then we are going to reduce the dark part. We are going to use it for the roughness. So if you connect, you can see that it's too shiny, and we don't want, there's no bread that is so shiny. I haven't seen a shiny bread before, so we are going to reduce the black texture. So the grayscale image determines how rough or smooth is it. The black part determines how reflective it is, and the white part will give it more roughness. So let's reduce the darkness. Of our color ramp. Okay, so it's okay. And then the next thing we are going to do is to add bump node. We are going to add height information. so that we get the real texture of our bread. So let's shift a vector and then go add the bump node, and then shift D to duplicate. I'm going to duplicate, let's space out a bit, and then select our bump node and then duplicate it one, and then let's duplicate another one again. So we have 3 bump nodes that we are going to be using to texture our bread. Okay, so we are going to use the 3 bump node. Let's view our bump node. So for the first one, we are going to again add our Voronoi texture, or the map range node that is connected to our Voronoi texture. We are going to connect it to the first bump node, and make sure that we are connecting it to the height. We are connecting it to the height of our bump node to get the effect, and then we are going to change the strength to 0.067 to reduce the effect of our bumpiness. Okay, so it's good for our bread. And then for the second node, we are going to add a couple of different nodes for the second texture. So for the second node, let's add another texture. Let's add the Voronoi texture, another Voronoi texture. Then let's input the mapping node from the same place, and then let's change the scale. We are going to change the scale to 21. Okay, let's change the scale of our Voronoi texture to 21. We are going to have this effect. So let's add another node. So this Voronoi texture, we are using it to texture the inner part of our bread. We are giving the realism for the inner part of our bread. So for this texture, I'm going to add another node, Shift A, and then add the map range node. Okay, and let's change the map range. Let's change from minimum to 0.4. Okay, so it's going to define our texture more, so it's going to give it more definition. And then let's join our map range node to the height of the second bump node, and then invert it. Click on the invert, and then let's change the strength. Let's change the strength to 0.367. Okay, so this is the effect that we get for our second bump node. Okay, with the second Voronoi texture that we've created. So for the third one, we are going to add another node in between our Voronoi texture and our map range node. So Shift A and then add the mix color. Go to color and add mix color node. And then for the mix color node, we are not really going to change anything inside. We just connect the result, make sure it's connected to the map range. Then let's view our third bump node, and then let's just connect our mix color into the height, and this is the effect you are getting. And then let's change the scale to the strength to 0.667. okay, and let's connect it to the normal. We are going to connect it to the normal. Okay, so we have to connect the 2 bump nodes. So we are going to connect this bump node to the normal of this, and we are seeing that we are not having the 2 effects at the same time. So if you connect also the first one to the second one to our first one, we get all 3 effects from our bump node. Okay, so that's it for the final texture we need for our inner parts, but we can see that it's showing all across our bread, and that's not how we want it. We want it to show only on the inner part. So what we are going to do is we are going to restrict the view in order to get it only on the inner part. So let's select our gradient texture and then use the grayscale image. Let's view the grayscale. Okay, So as you can see, it's only the inner part. We want it only at where the black is showing. So we are going to use the grayscale information to determine where our texture is going to be. So let's connect it to the factor of our mix node. So as you can see, it's only showing the effect on the inner part of our bread. So as you can see, we have it only on the inner part, and then the Voronoi texture, the first one, is showing on the outer part. So that's it for our final texturing. Okay, let's view the principled shader, and then let's now connect our normal node to the normal. So as you can see now, we have our bread, the inner part, the bump node affecting our bread. So as you can see, the inner part has texture, a realistic bump node texture, and we are going to change the subsurface. So let's change the subsurface to 0.2 so that we get a realistic look, so that light is going to pass through our bread to give it a more realistic effect. And let's change the specular. Let's reduce the specular to 0.2. We don't want much reflection on our bread, so we are going to change the reflection to 0.2, the specular to 0.2. Okay, so that is it for our final bread. That's the final texture for our bread. It's a bit complicated, but it's not really a roller coaster, so you can bear with me. So as you can see, we have our breakfast scene ready. Okay, our bread, the texture for our bread is set, the texture for our mark is also set. So the next thing we are going to be texturing is the crumbs, the bread crumbs that we have on our tray. So technically we are going to be using the same texture we have for the bread. We are going to make only some few changes. So to give it the texture, let's select one of our breadcrumbs, and then in the materials tab, let's select one breadcrumb. Let's select our breadcrumbs, then isolate it, and then let's view it in the rendered mode. Select one and then add the bread crisps, and then after you've added it, add the same texture as the bread to all our crumbs. Now what we are going to do next is we are going to change this crumb just a bit. We are going to make a bit of adjustment to one of our breadcrumbs. So come to the textures tab and then click on the number next to it, and then let's change the name to breadcrumb. So we now have a different texture from our original bread texture. So if you make changes, it's not going to affect our bread texture. So let's go to this first color ramp node, and we are going to do just a little change. We are going to change a bit. So let's change the hue. We are going to change the hue of the color ramp. Let's select it and go, and let's change the hue to 0.158, and then we change the saturation to 0.526, and then the value, also change the value to 0.847. Okay, so as you can see, we are getting a faded version of our bread crisps. So it looks more like the inner part of our bread crisps, so that it looks like the breadcrumbs, some came from the inner parts and then some also fell from the crisp itself. So we can now view it in our viewport. Let's see how it looks on our tray. Okay, so as you can see, we now have our breadcrumbs textured, and it's looking even more delicious with our breadcrumbs on our tray. Okay, so let's go back to our solid view, and then what we are going to do next is to texture our floor. So let's select our floor, and then we are going to add an image texture. Let's go to the material tab and add a new material and then rename it. So for our floor material, we are going to add a wood, so that it seems like we have our breakfast on the table. So press Shift A and then go to the texture and then add image texture. So you can click on open and then navigate to where you have your image texture. So I'll navigate to where I have my image texture and then add this wood. This is from textures.com and it's free, so you can go to textures.com and download any wood texture you want. Okay, so let's connect to the base color, and then we are going to press Ctrl T to bring our mapping node. Okay, and then what we are going to do is, we don't have a row scale, so we are going to change the scale of our object to 6 so that it matches with the real life scale. Not really real life, but reasonable. So what we are going to do next is for the roughness, let's add a color ramp node and then connect it with our wood texture, and then let's connect it to our roughness. Okay, and we can reduce the black value a bit, because you can increase the saturation or the value up a bit. Let's duplicate our image texture and then connect our mapping node to it, and then what we are going to do is we add another node, which is the bump node for our bump textures. Let's view it and then connect it to the height. So we are going to change it from sRGB to non-color. Okay, and let's change the strength. Let's change the strength to 0.1, and then we are going to view it. Okay, and then let's connect our normal to the normal of our principled BSDF. It seems like our color is fading out. Okay, let's change it to the non-color. So what we have here is you have to change this to the non-color, but it's still connected. It's the same material as the first one. So let's click on the number beside it and we get a different material. So when we change it to non-color, it doesn't affect our first image texture. Okay, so we now have our image texture intact. But what we are going to do next is, our world scene is looking so dark, it's looking gloomy, so let's improve it. So our background texture, which is the world texture, we are going to add an HDRI image. So Shift A and add the environment texture. So we want to add an HDRI, the inbuilt HDRI. We can't render these ones, so I'm going to show you a way where to get these inbuilt textures. So go to open and go to the local disk C, the default disk, and then go to programs and then go to Blender Foundation. So in the folder you find the Blender version and open it, and then go to data files, studio lights, and then world. So this is where you can find the HDRI, and then let's select the sunset, then connect it to our color. Okay, so we are having the HDRI affect our scene. It's going to show in our renders. And let's change the strength to 0.5. Okay, so we are now going to have our HDRI scene rendered in our final render. So you can view our scene. Let's look at how our final scene looks in the 3D viewport. Let's look at how it looks in the 3D viewports. Okay, so our breakfast is looking good. So let's view it from different angles. So we have our breadcrumbs looking delicious on our tray, and you can see the realistic textures we have for our 3D objects, our cloth, our mug, and our bread. Okay, so you can set your camera for any view, so you can pick a very suitable scene of suitable view and then add your camera view to it. So that's it for our texturing. So let's change our render settings. I normally use the 100 samples and then go to the light part and then change the total to 4. Then let's uncheck the reflective and the refractive, and then make sure that the transparent is also checked so that it doesn't render any unwanted background. And for the output, you can leave the default as it is, and then all you have to do is press your F11 button and then wait for your image to render. So just wait patiently for your final breakfast to cook, and you have a delicious meal right before you. Okay, that's it for this tutorial, and I bet you learned a lot from it. So follow up for more comprehensive and exciting tutorials, and I bet you won't be disappointed. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more interesting Blender stuff, and feed the algorithm to help this channel grow. Catch you in the next one.